we all know Sir Sam Jonah has advised many African presidents and continue to do so. In 2005, Sir Sam Jonah was invited to join a committee of honorary advisors to His Excellency President Obasanjo at the time. And this, everything I'm saying, is public record that can be checked with the Nigeria Investment Promotion Council. Sir Sam, along with several prominent people, including Dangote, Lady Choka, and a whole lot of other prominent Africans, were composed of a committee, which was called HIIC, advising His Excellency President Obasanjo. It was during one of those meetings that, and this is about 2005, 2006, that Sir Sam expressed his interest to invest in Nigeria. And that is where JonahCapital, as a company, was formed. Now, at the time, during the formation of the company, and every document I have, everything I'm talking about here is backed by documents, and most of them also via email correspondence. During the formation of the company, Sir Sam engaged a couple who were close to also the presidency, who's Adeniran Ogunmuyiwa and his wife Olakitan Ogunmuyiwa. So Sir Sam was the majority shareholder of the company, where he had 40%, and the couple had 30% each. Now, in 2007...
What was the primary purpose of the incorporation when it started?
Absolutely. So the company JonahCapital was now granted a development lease agreement, which I have a copy here, giving it 501 hectares of land, which is now the River Park Estate. Now, in 2007, at the time Sir Sam was president of Anglo Gold and based in South Africa, he was approached by a company called Houses for Africa Holdings, which has interests across other African countries. So they approached Sir Sam to become an investor. So during Sir Sam joining that company, he invested money in that company, which is also the records are there, and became the chairman of that company and 18% shareholder of Houses for African Holdings. Now, in 2007...
Just before we move into 2007, at what point did the two Nigerians, the couple in question, who were members and shareholders of Sam Jonah Capital, at what point did they relinquish their shares?
And I'm coming there.
Okay.
So when Houses for Africa Holdings was entered Nigeria, they now formed Houses for Africa Nigeria Limited. Houses for Africa Nigeria Limited now took over JonahCapital. And by so doing, all the shareholders, including Sir Sam Jonah, all relinquished their shares. This is something that is very muted. It makes it seem that if Sir Sam was the only party that relinquished his shares. In fact, I have CAC certified true copies of the relinquishment of those shares here, where all the other parties, including Sir Sam, relinquished their shares. Now, so Houses for Africa Nigeria Limited, which was formed, was now 80% owned by the US or South African-based company, and then the couple were given 20% of that company. This is also registered by the CAC. Now, in 2000, so essentially you would say Sir Sam had exited the company and was the board chairman of the global company. In 2009, 2010, thereabout, the company, which was financed by a major Dutch company called FMO Bank, and this is verifiable information. You can contact FMO, they will give you the records. FMO Bank now decided that they were no longer interested in doing real estate on the African continent. So at this point in time, Houses for Africa Nigeria Limited, Houses for Africa Holdings was bankrupt. Now, at the time, that was when I came into the picture, I moved to Ghana in September 2010. So I was actually in the office with Sir Sam when the managing director of the company at the time, called John Townley Johnson, and Adeniran Ogunmuyiwa, the other party, and the project manager called Andre Wasserman, came to meet Sir Sam that with the withdrawal of FMO, there is no major financier to fund the company, and the company was essentially being liquidated. That is the point that Sir Sam decided to send me to Nigeria in 2011 to go and do a feasibility on the project. I came back to Sir Sam and advised him that, look, it's a good opportunity. Let us go to Nigeria and invest in the company. Now, as I mentioned, Ogunmuyiwa, the couple, had 20% in Houses for Africa Nigeria Limited. In fact, Everything that I'm talking about here, I have documentary evidence, all via email, by the way, incontrovertible documents by email. Now, I negotiated for the acquisition of the company. Personally, I went to Holland to go and meet the bank. I have correspondence with myself and the bank, and it was because at that time the company was just full of liabilities. There was nothing. There was nothing. So we agreed and signed a completion agreement, which I have here. In 2012, and in that completion agreement, Sir Sam was to pay $1 million to acquire the company, its liabilities and everything. It was essentially supposed to be a nominal acquisition because there was nothing. We immediately paid $500,000 as per the completion agreement. Now, Olakitan and her husband, Ogunmuyiwa, for their 20%, were given 20% of the land, which came to 140 hectares. And signed as an agreement, which I also have here.
They signed an agreement?
They signed an agreement. In fact, they constructed the agreement and sent it to me by email. So everything I'm talking about here is backed by emails. In fact, God knows what would have happened if we didn't have email technology then. They sent these documents by email, and in fact, at some point in time, in the shortest possible time, we're going to publish all these documents for the whole world to see. This couple then signed a power of attorney for 140 hectares, which was granted to them.
Out of the 501
out of the 501 hectares, which at that point in time, because of certain encroachments and easements, had been reduced to, I think, 470-something hectares. I have all those documents here.
At what point did Paul Odili come in the picture? Because I can see in this document you wrote to the Foreign Affairs Minister that indeed you contacted him to help with some documentation.
Yes, absolutely, and I have it here. So now, when Ogunmuyiwa and the Ogunmuyiwas now got the 140 hectares, they relinquished their shares. The shareholding relinquishment and everything is here in the heads of agreement, which was also registered at CAC, by the way. Now, when I joined the company or met the company was in an office called Polo Towers or something like that. So the landlord was Paul Odili. Now, Adrian was the person who introduced me to Paul Odili. In fact, when we took over the company, and Sir Sam, with his initial investment into Nigeria, the creditors of the company included Paul Odili, who were settled from the UBA National Hospital, branch hospital, by myself, including all other creditors of the company. So it was, and I have all those records by email, Swift advice, bank documents. I have them all. Now, Adrian then approached me, because at that time we were cordial, and said, look, I have entered into a partnership with Paul to develop my land. He helped me get approvals. And I think that because you guys are foreigners, why don't you approach him so he can assist you into getting approvals? That is when we signed a joint venture. When
you say approvals, what kind of approvals?
That's what you would call land, building approvals.
Okay.
Yeah, in Nigeria, the version is called as development control approvals. Now, that is when.
Is it the case that you could not do that independently?
Well, it's a very complex environment. It's a complex environment, and indeed, look, I had just entered the environment. I didn't know my way around. Let's be frank about that. And it's always good to have local people who know their way around to assist you. Now, when we engaged Paul Odili, he came to Ghana, came to meet us, met Sir Sam Jonah, and we signed a joint venture agreement on 28th of January 2013. Paul Odili had only two functions, was to secure the land from encumbrance, which, as I mentioned to you, there were several encumbrances in the land, and also to help with approval, securing approvals.
I could also see in the petition you wrote to the Foreign Affairs Minister that you contacted him for some 330 acres of land.
That was the portion of the land that was residual after we had given the Ogunmuyiwas the 140 hectares.
I see. And but he didn't do that job. He only procured approval for some 220 acres
And when
of
he
land.
did the 220 hectares, we gave him 30% as per the agreement, which was 66 hectares. I have bank records of all the funds we have given Paul Odili over the years to for approvals for some infrastructure works and all that, which we have also submitted all that to the authorities, which is in excess of $4 million.
How is Paul Odili now claiming ownership of River Park
Exactly.
Estate?
So after, I mean, everybody had received what they had received, Paul had done his work and all that. Just about over a year ago, we noticed that portions of our land was being encroached. So we wrote him. In fact, I think we gave a copy of the letter to you, where Sir Sam wrote him, said, account to me, based on the joint ventureship agreement that we signed, that what is going on. In fact, the very first day Paul Odili got that letter, there was a street in the estate called Sam Jonah Way. He went and removed the street and put Victory Way. You can go and ask anybody in River Park Estate, they will tell you that. Anyway. Now, when we petitioned the police, in fact, Paul threatened my life. We petitioned the local police. He had nowhere to go. So what did Paul Odili do? He contacted the Ogunmuyiwas and the South Africans that had come in through Sir Sam to claim that all those documents they had transmitted to us via email were forged by us. Indeed, I just shared with you the share certificate of the acquisition of the company. That was also sent by email. I have emails, every single document.
You took this to the police station,
We took this to the police
IGP
station,
commissioned a committee to look into it. What was the findings of that committee?
So the matter was in about 5 police stations. And I think the IGP did the honorable thing by saying that I'm going to consolidate this matter and set up in his office. The IGP set up a committee called the Special Investigation Panel, led by a senior officer called Imam, who is alive, by the way. I have the letters. They invited us. We had 3 sittings. I joined one by Zoom and one physically. He invited, and they traced, in fact, in Nigeria at the time, all company registration documents were done manually. So you have the records and the Nigeria Bar Association number of the lawyers who did all those filings, right? They took statements from all those filings, all the witness statements, and on April 9th, and in fact, the Ghana High Commission participated in all these hearings that we had. On April 9th, the principal staff officer, who or less will be the chief of staff of the Inspector General of Police, invited us and the acting with the Ghana High Commission, presented all parties and told us that I have finished we have concluded the investigation. This is the final report. Showed us the final report, which exonerated us completely from any form of forgery based on the witness statements and all the email documentation we shared with them. You would not believe it. They said that they were going to send the SIP report to legal, for legal to review and send it to a department in the police called monitoring unit for warehousing. That very same day, the general manager of Paul Odili wrote a petition to the Assistant Commissioner of Police in charge of monitoring. His name is Fakorede. Fakorede approved that petition that same day and said he was now going to reinvestigate what the 10-man panel had done.
Did